Ladies and gentlemen, good evening, and thank you very much for coming to this inaugural Leonard Steinberg Memorial Lecture. The remarkable array of people here tonight reflect the extraordinary diversity of Leonard Steinberg's life. We have people from the business world reflecting his own status as one of Britain's preeminent entrepreneurs. We have people who speak to his interest in his remarkable range of philanthropic activities, not least with the Manchester Jewish Federation. People here reflecting his interest in the Conservative Party as a prominent peer and also as a highly successful Deputy Treasurer of the Conservative Party at the time of the nadir of its fortunes, in which respect may be said to have played a highly significant part in keeping the party financially alive. His interest in Ulster Unionism and in the affairs of his native Northern Ireland. His activities also as President of Lancashire County Cricket Club. His activities as head of the President of the Imperial War Museum North, and others reflecting his other interests as a stamp collector and art collector. It is a great privilege to welcome all of you. It is a huge tribute to him. But above all, we of course would wish to extend the warmest welcomes to the Steinberg family, preeminently to his widow Beryl, to his son Jonathan, daughter Lynn, son-in-law Jimmy. Thank you all very much for coming. Please join me in expressing appreciation. The choice of a Secretary of State for Northern Ireland is particularly appropriate because the theme of the Northern Ireland, its discontents, and making peace in Northern Ireland ran like a thread through his life, even after he came to England. And I think it's significant because the title of the talk tonight, which the Secretary of State is going to give, reflecting on the past, and Leonard's approach to his own personal past was so utterly distinct and different from much in contemporary political culture in Northern Ireland. Not for him the whinge culture, not for him backward looking, not for him to complain. He always looked forward, whatever he went through during the totality of his life. And I think it was remarkable, certainly when I played a part in writing the obituary of him for the Daily Telegraph, that until that moment I'd never known that he'd been himself attacked by the IRA, even though we discussed the provisional IRA 1,000 times. Indeed, it was altogether, to my mind, typical of his sense of humour when he contributed in a debate on Northern Ireland after the IRA's robbery of the Northern Bank, the largest single bank robbery, I think, in European history, which netted about 20 billion sterling. He stood up, he said, "I must declare an interest in the matter. I have an account in the Northern Bank that was robbed." It's a great privilege to be able to welcome the current Secretary of State, because so much of your current work, but also even prior to assuming your current responsibilities, both as Secretary of State and Shadow Secretary of State, overlapped with that of Leonard Steinberg. Your business activities, first of all, then your own role, obviously, in the Conservative Party and in the Conservative revival, but also, more particularly, of course, also your strong support for Conservative Friends of Israel over many years. It's a great privilege to be able to receive you tonight. You've been a great friend of Policy Exchange, and I know that you will do the theme and Leonard's memory full justice here. Thank you. Thank you very much for that splendidly brief introduction. When Dean asked me in the summer to deliver the inaugural Leonard Steinberg Memorial Lecture, I had absolutely no hesitation in accepting. That's because it's a great privilege for me to speak in honour of Leonard Steinberg, Lord Steinberg of Belfast. And I'd like to add a very warm welcome to members of the Steinberg family who have travelled here to attend this inaugural lecture in honour of Leonard. My thanks also go to Dean for his kind invitation to me and to Policy Exchange for hosting this event tonight. Dean has of course established himself over the years as one of the foremost authorities on politics and security in Northern Ireland. His monumental biography of Lord Trimble, who I'm delighted to see here tonight, is testimony to that. and I've read every page of it. Anything that Dean writes on Northern Ireland, typically forthright and trenchant in tone, is worth reading. This evening, I want to speak about what the coalition government is doing to build the peaceful, stable and prosperous Northern Ireland that was so close to Leonard Steinberg's heart, and that of all of us gathered in this room. I want to talk about our commitment to helping Northern Ireland fulfil its potential to play a full role on the main stage of UK politics. And I want to set out our approach to rebuilding Northern Ireland's economy. And I also want to say a little about some of the possible approaches to dealing with Northern Ireland's bloody past, which also, as we know, had such an impact on Leonard Steinberg's life. Leonard once famously said, "I am Jewish, Northern Irish, and an Ulster Unionist." I hope that doesn't cause confusion. To which my reply is certainly not. After all, it's worth remembering that Belfast had its first Jewish and Unionist Lord Mayor, Otto Jaffe, as far back as 1899. And he went on to serve a second term from 1904 to 1905, the same year that saw the foundation of the Ulster Unionist Council. Let's not forget also that the sixth President of Israel, Chaim Herzog, was born in North Belfast and had a distinguished career as a tank commander and intelligence officer in the British Army. All of this brings home to me two important facts. First is the often underestimated contribution of the Jewish community to the life of Northern Ireland and particularly Belfast. Second, that at its strongest, unionism should appeal across the community to people of all religious faiths and of none. And in Leonard Steinberg, unionism had a champion who combined devotion to his Jewish faith with a passionate belief in our United Kingdom. But Leonard was just an Ulster Unionist. He was also a deeply loyal conservative, as he put it, with a very large C, through the good times and the bad. It might be something of an understatement to say that the period from 1997 to 2005 was not the happiest in the Conservative Party's long history. But throughout, Leonard's commitment to the party never for 1 minute wavered. He was a truly generous donor and a successful deputy treasurer of the party at a time when backing the party was hardly fashionable. And I saw that myself at first hand during the 2 years I served as parliamentary private secretary to Ian Duncan-Smith when he was leader of the party. And he would of course have been delighted to see David Cameron in Downing Street. In addition to his business interests and contribution to the party, I should also mention Leonard's charitable work. He was, to use the Hebrew term, Baal Tzedakah, a philanthropist on behalf of a whole range of Jewish and non-Jewish causes. When setting up the Northern Ireland Friends of Israel, Leonard described it as bringing together the two most important strands of his life. It was as a staunch conservative and Ulster Unionist that Leonard discussed the state of politics in Northern Ireland with me after I became Shadow Secretary of State in 2007. In fact, sadly, the morning that Leonard died, I was actually travelling to London to meet him to discuss two issues: the revival of the Conservative Party's electoral alliance with the Ulster Unionists, and plans to establish the Centre for Social Justice in Belfast, the first branch outside London. Leonard was a true philanthropist who shared the traditional Conservative commitment to tackling deep-seated social problems and was keen to see that applied in Northern Ireland. And Leonard was also very supportive of our attempts to develop national politics in Northern Ireland. He shared David Cameron's and my great desire to end Northern Ireland's semi-detached political status and help it play a full part in the mainstream of UK politics. Now, our opponents have made much of the fact that we didn't win any seats in May. In fact, we achieved over 100,000 votes for national politics, and we came very close in 3 constituencies. For every 5 votes we secured, we won no seats, while for every 7 votes, the DUP secured they won 8 seats. So although I remain an unapologetic supporter of the first past post system, it does sometimes throw up tough results which are hard to accept. So despite the general election not going quite as well as we had hoped in Northern Ireland,
David Cameron and I remain committed to the principles on which we fought it. Now, let me tell you why. For us, it's a simple matter of democracy. It is surely wrong that the people of Northern Ireland, alone in the United Kingdom, should be deprived of the opportunity to vote for parties that can form their government in Westminster. As David Cameron put it, why is it that people from Northern Ireland rise to the top of our armed forces, excel in business, sport, the arts, yet nobody sitting for a Northern Ireland constituency serves in the British government? This is an anomaly. It is undemocratic, and it should change. And that's why we made sure that written into the coalition programme for government is a clear commitment to, quote, work to bring Northern Ireland back into the mainstream of UK politics. There are some who attack this position, tell us it's incompatible with the UK government acting as an honest broker between the Northern Ireland parties. I disagree profoundly with this. For a start, the logic of that argument is that Northern Ireland people should be effectively disenfranchised and treated permanently as second-class citizens when it comes to electing their government. That cannot be attractive to anyone who believes in democracy and the basic right to equal citizenship. Why should people from Northern Ireland be excluded from playing a part in electing their national government? I simply do not accept that having an electoral interest, or putting it another way, being a player, prevents us from working with all parts of the community to build a better Northern Ireland for everyone. And any suggestion to the contrary is in short nonsense, as is borne out by some of the decisions and actions we have taken over the past 6 months. We will always seek to do the right thing, whether it was our decision to publish the report of the Bloody Sunday inquiry as quickly as possible after taking office, or our determination to help resolve the crisis in the Presbyterian Mutual Society. Equally, our strong support for the Union does not run counter to the principle of consent and the binding commitments made by successive UK governments in respect of the constitutional position of Northern Ireland. I've never accepted that while it's perfectly legitimate for the Irish government to state its belief in the United Ireland, it's somehow illegitimate for the United Kingdom government to express its belief in the United Kingdom. The difference between us and the previous administration is that in David Cameron's word, we will never be neutral in expressing our support for the Union. Of course, we remain hugely supportive of the political institutions that have been established in Northern Ireland. We passionately want devolution to work, so we will faithfully uphold and implement the Belfast Agreement and its successors. And we will never do anything that puts the progress of the past 20 years at risk. Today, politics in Northern Ireland is more stable than it's been for over a generation. Devolution has been completed. All the key services, including policing and justice, are run by politicians at Stormont. Cooperation between North and South, and between the UK and Irish governments, is closer than ever. And I welcome that. And we will work hard to ensure that that continues. But I'm also well aware of concerns over the functioning of the executive, and set out my views on this at the time of the election. We need a fully inclusive executive, working for the people of Northern Ireland of the kind envisaged in the Belfast Agreement. The internal workings of the executive are primarily matters for local politicians to resolve. So I'm pleased that the proposals put forward by the committee co-chaired by Reg MP and Margaret Ritchie are now being implemented. And I said at the election that over time, we would like the institutions to evolve into a more normal system with a government and an opposition. As Bertie Ahern himself put it in an interview with Frank Miller in 2009, quote, "There will come a time when people will say you need an opposition, you need us and them." But I also made absolutely clear that any changes are for the future and will only come about after full consultation and with the agreement of the parties in the Assembly. Yet support for devolution and the agreements is not inconsistent with also wanting to bring Northern Ireland into the political mainstream. In fact, I believe that this is the logical outworking of the Belfast Agreement, in which all the parties accepted the, quote, legitimacy of whatever choice is freely exercised by a majority of the people of Northern Ireland with regard to its status. a clear majority does freely and legitimately continue to support the United Kingdom. Northern Ireland is not a hybrid state. The agreement, backed by 71% in the north, 94% in the south, not only endorsed devolution but also made clear that significant competencies should be retained by Westminster. Significant consequences flow from these points. One is that there is no reason why the constitutional issue should remain the defining characteristic of Northern Ireland politics. It was settled on the basis of the consent principle. And another is that people in Northern Ireland should be able to play a full role in the mainstream of political life in the country on which they legitimately form a part. And that's what the Conservative Party, in partnership or on our own, will continue to offer. We want to see local politicians developing local policies, but also have a major influence at national level. We also want to tidy up some of the anomalies that are unique to Northern Ireland. And to do this, I'm increasingly attracted to the idea of a normalisation bill during the course of this Parliament. This could deal with issues such as political donations, elements of electoral law, and yet, if it's not been resolved by consensus, ending once and for all double jobbing at Stormont and Westminster. My aim would be to have them resolved by the time of the 2015 Stormont and Westminster elections. Bringing Northern Ireland into the mainstream is something that had the full-hearted backing of Leonard Steinberg. But as a hugely successful businessman, I know that Leonard was an equally enthusiastic supporter of our plans to rebalance and revive the Northern Ireland economy. Because if anyone, anybody epitomised the entrepreneurial spirit, the can-do mentality, it was a man whose business empire began as a single, unlicensed betting shop at the back of his father's Belfast milk shop. As Shadow Secretary of State from 2007, I visited Northern Ireland virtually every week. And I made a point of going outside the political bubble. I went to businesses, trade unions, charities, community groups. And I am absolutely convinced that just like anywhere else in the United Kingdom, the economy and jobs, not constitutional issues, are the things that most concern the vast majority of people in Northern Ireland today. Under devolution, responsibility for economic development is mainly in local hands. But the UK government also continues to play a key role. And I want to say a few words about how we're approaching the task of assisting economic recovery in Northern Ireland. I need hardly point out to this audience the complete financial and economic mess the coalition government's inherited. The national debt doubled, the largest deficit in the G20. As a result of Labour's mismanagement, we are currently borrowing around £270,000 a minute. Debt interest is running at 43 billion this year. It's going to go up to 63 billion at the end of this Parliament. That's more than double the whole of public expenditure in Northern Ireland. It's dead money that will never be invested in a single school, hospital or police officer, at least in this country. We can't go on like this. There's nothing fair or progressive about offloading the nation's credit card bills onto our children and our grandchildren, telling them in effect they can't invest in public services due to our profligacy. So tackling the deficit has to be the #1 priority of the coalition if we're to increase business confidence and put the country back on the road to sustain economic growth. And as a part of the United Kingdom, Northern Ireland has to make its contribution, as it always has done when our country has faced a crisis. Against that background, and in exceptionally difficult circumstances, I believe that we argued for and secured a fair deal for Northern Ireland in the recent spending review settlement. Just before the spending review, Northern Ireland ministers in the executive were being briefed that they would be facing reductions of 18% on current spending and 48% on capital spending. In fact, the executive is being asked to make savings on current spending of 6.9 over the next 4 years, against an average for most UK departments of 19%, and in the case of the NIO, 25%. And while reductions in the capital budget are larger at 37%, though not as large as the 50% planned by Labour, we are confident that we're on course to deliver the 18 billion package for capital investment promised by the then Chancellor at St Andrews. In addition, we were able to make available the 200 million asked of us by the executive to provide a just and fair resolution of the crisis in the Presbyterian Mutual Society. Reg MP first took me to meet the PMS and alerted me to the very real hardship being experienced as a result of its collapse. I then raised it with David Cameron, who was convinced of the need to act, and under Labour, this issue was frankly going absolutely nowhere. David Cameron made it an election commitment in Northern Ireland, and we have delivered. And I believe that the economies we're asking the Executive to make, £1.72 in every £100 of current expenditure, really are achievable. A recent paper by the CBI in Northern Ireland showed how £1 billion could be saved by running public services more efficiently. A report by Deloitte in 2007 highlighted the £1.5 billion that could be saved annually by ending the costs of division and segregation, by building a truly shared future. And like us, Leonard Steinberg wanted to see a Northern Ireland in which people have a genuinely shared future, and he showed this through his support for integrated education. That work has been continued by his brother Gerald, whose journey here this evening was sadly frustrated by bad weather. What Northern Ireland now needs is clarity and certainty. The substantial settlement announced by the Chancellor on the 20th of October is precisely that, a settlement. So it's now essential that the Executive completes the task of setting its own budget so that it can deliver the services on which people rely. As a government, however, and working with the Executive, we are looking at ways of dealing with the long-term structural weaknesses of the Northern Ireland economy. I fly in and out of Belfast every week. When I see the great cranes of Harland and Wolff, I'm immediately reminded of Northern Ireland's great industrial past. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, Ulster was the economic powerhouse of Ireland. It was renowned for innovation and enterprise. Today, though, Northern Ireland is massively over-dependent on the public sector. Over 30% of employment is in the public sector. Well, according to one survey, public spending accounts for a staggering 77.6% of GDP. And of course, I understand many of the reasons for this. The decline in a number of traditional industries coincided with the IRA's campaign of terror and economic destruction. And Leonard Steinberg was himself one of the victims of this campaign. After bravely refusing to pay protection money, he was shot 5 times outside his Antrim Road home in 1977. And like many other members of the Belfast Jewish community, forced out of Northern Ireland. One of Leonard's friends, Leonard Cateser, was shot dead by terrorists in 1980. So I readily accept that the climate for starting up new businesses, and despite the efforts of successive governments for attracting inward investment, was hardly encouraging. Selling Northern Ireland was, to put it mildly, a challenge. But as every party today recognises, Northern Ireland's reliance on the public sector is simply unsustainable. Despite its incredibly difficult recent history, Northern Ireland does have some spectacular world-class companies. Last week I went to West London and I attended the unveiling of the full-size mock-up new London bus with Boris Johnson, combining all the character of the old route master with some of the convenience of the loathsome, self-igniting bendy bus. It's a superb product, and it's being built by Wrightbus, a world-renowned private family business in Ballymena. The problem we have is that Northern Ireland needs many more buses like Wrightbus. And we also have challenges that are unique within the United Kingdom. One I just mentioned is the legacy of the Troubles. Another is the fact that we share a land border with a country that has a significantly lower rate of corporation tax than we do. Despite its current economic problems, in the first 6 months of this year, the Republic of Ireland attracted over 50 foreign direct investments, including a number of big global hitters. While we were upstairs, I got a message on my BlackBerry confirming that of the $71 billion foreign inward investment into the whole of the British Isles last year, 35% went to the Republic of Ireland, despite all its current difficulties. There's an obvious reason for this, and it does put us at a real competitive disadvantage. So we have to find ways of getting the private sector moving to lead the recovery and create the jobs of the future. And that's why by the end of the year, and working with the Executive, the government will produce a paper on rebalancing the Northern Ireland economy. That will look at possible ways of turning the whole of Northern Ireland into an enterprise zone. and potential mechanisms for giving a separate rate of corporation tax to attract significant new investment. I first discussed this idea with Sir George Quigley at the investment conference, Hillsborough, April 2008. And since then, particularly when I was in businesses, I've become more and more and more convinced that it can be a game changer for the whole of Northern Ireland. Rebalancing will take time, perhaps up to 25 years, although, as I've said on many occasions, to do nothing is simply not an option. Equally, doing anything too rapid would be reckless. But I'm determined to make a start, and against a background of peace and stability, begin the process of turning Northern Ireland once again into an economic powerhouse. Just let me repeat those words, against a backdrop of peace and stability. As I said earlier, politics in Northern Ireland is at its most stable for over a generation. But do we have peace? Unquestionably, the security situation is transformed from what it was in the 70s, 80s and early 90s. Operation Banner, the longest continuous deployment in British military history, ended in 2007. Policing is now devolved and locally accountable for the first time since 1972. So, let's not downplay the positives and acknowledge the very great progress that's been made since the mid-1990s. Northern Ireland has come a long way, and for the better. We do, though, face a real and serious threat from residual terrorist groups. They're small in number, they have no popular or political support, they have no popular representation. And their objectives appear to be to turn the whole of Ireland into some kind of ghastly hybrid of North Korea and Enver Hoxha's Albania. But as we've seen tragically over the past couple of years, they have a complete disregard for life and property. And their capabilities and ambitions are increasing. So the coalition government is anything but complacent. Since May, we've been decisive in our efforts to get to grips with the deteriorating situation that we inherited. Threat level in Northern Ireland is severe. In September, we raised it from moderate to substantial here in Great Britain, and in October, the National Security Strategy paper placed the threat as a Tier 1 priority. I have no doubt that working closely together with the PSNI, the local Justice Minister, and our colleagues in the Garda Síochána, we will pursue these terrorists and prevent them from succeeding. And here, let me pay tribute to the Garda Commissioner, Faulkner Murphy, sitting here, who's shortly to retire. These terrorist groups have no greater foe, and the PSNI no greater ally than Faulkner. It's a huge testament to the cooperation that now exists between us, that Matt Baggott told me recently that he has a closer relationship with Faulkner than he did with any of his neighbouring forces when he was Chief Constable in Leicestershire. And as the Prime Minister said in Birmingham, we will protect the people of our country with all the means at our disposal. We will always stand by our fellow citizens in Northern Ireland. Overwhelmingly, they do not want to see Northern Ireland dragged back to the past, and we will not allow that to happen. Now, dealing with Northern Ireland's contentious past is one of the issues that has yet to be resolved. 30 years of terrorism has left a terrible legacy for individuals, families, and society as a whole. There can be few people in Northern Ireland who lived through the Troubles who've not been affected directly or indirectly. The previous government sought to tackle the past by setting up a consultative group on the past chaired by Lord Eames and Dennis Bradley, which reported in January 2009. Eames Bradley contained many useful and interesting ideas and was a highly significant contribution to the debate, but sadly it was inevitably overshadowed by the proposal for a universal recognition payment to the families of all those killed in the Troubles, including terrorists. So needless to say, this government will not be taking that particular idea forward. We did, though, publish a summary of the responses to Eames Bradley in July this year, something which, if I can put it politely, my predecessor had rather sat on. What it demonstrated is the almost complete absence of any consensus on how to move forward. There are those who argue to simply draw a line under the past and attempt to move on, while others make the case for a full-blown Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Some people just want to know the truth about what happened to their loved ones. Was he cold when they shot him? Did they give him something to eat in the last half hour? In other cases, there's a strong yearning for justice. I'm clear, therefore, that whatever suggestions the government makes, they're not going to satisfy everyone. It's also apparent to me that the government can't simply impose solutions on the people of Northern Ireland. Local politicians, victims groups, the broad community have to be fully involved. Any approach to the past has to be made in Northern Ireland. And before briefly discussing some options, let me tell you what we won't be doing. We will not be party to any one-sided attempt to rewrite history in a way that puts the RUC, the PSNI and our armed forces on the same footing as terrorists. Politically motivated violence from whatever side was never justified, and we will always condemn terrorism. We will never forget the sacrifice of our police and armed forces in defending democracy and the rule of law. Some of those who served are in the room this evening, and we all owe them a huge debt of gratitude. At the same time, however, when the state or those who served it do the wrong thing, we will accept responsibility and apologise, as the Prime Minister rightly did over Bloody Sunday, or as I did in the case of Claudia. But continuing to pick out selective cases subject to a lengthy public inquiry is not a viable approach to dealing with the legacy of a conflict in which thousands of people from all parts of the community were killed. And we should remember that 10% of the deaths in the Troubles were tragically at the hands of the security forces, while 30% were carried out by loyalist paramilitaries and 60% by Republican paramilitaries. We cannot have a hierarchy of investigations. Moreover, there is no guarantee that public inquiries provide satisfaction for victims' families. The Billy Wright inquiry took 6 years and cost £30 million. Yet it could not answer the most basic question as to how the guns that killed him were smuggled into what was then Europe's most high-security prison. So, as the Prime Minister and I have made clear, there will be no new, costly and open-ended public inquiries. There are alternative ongoing processes that are helping families to find answers. And in particular, I applaud the work of the Historical Inquiries team, which is patiently and meticulously working its way through 3,268 deaths during the Troubles, including soldiers and police officers who lost their lives. The 86% satisfaction rate that the HET achieves among families who have received reports demonstrates the success it is having in helping to bring a measure of resolution. So what are the other options? Well, one is to simply say it's all too difficult and traumatic and just seek to draw a line. The obvious example of this is the Pact of Oblivion in Spain following the death of Franco, underpinned by the 1977 amnesty law. I remain doubtful, however, whether Northern Ireland is ready to shut down the past in this way. And I don't believe that an amnesty, central to the Spanish experience, would be appropriate or acceptable in the United Kingdom. And we will not compromise our commitment to the rule of law. Another option might be to keep existing processes, but focus on improving practical support to victims. One brilliant example of where this can really make a difference is the Northern Ireland Centre for Trauma and Transformation at Owen, which has treated over 500 people for complex post-traumatic stress disorder since it was set up in 2002. Victim support is, however, now mainly a devolved matter, so there's only a limited amount the UK government can do. And in addition, there are limits on the extent to which practical support can serve as an overall strategy, as it clearly does not meet the needs of those who want closure. A third option, as proposed by Eames Bradley, is an independent legacy commission. There was, however, little confidence in response to the consultation that former paramilitaries would be willing to engage, leading to one party describing it as, quote, a one-sided truth commission. In addition, there's a question of cost. Eames Bradley themselves are talking in the hundreds of millions. If there's no consensus on a legacy commission, then I doubt there would be a strong appetite in Northern Ireland for a full-blown Truth and Reconciliation Commission on the South African model. A key part of the South African process was the power to grant amnesties which, as I have just said, would not necessarily be acceptable or appropriate here. A further idea is some kind of mechanism for information sharing and recovery. Spanish legislation in 2007 included provision for a historical memory documentary centre in Salamanca, with public access to archives and documents. Anything similar in Northern Ireland would clearly need involvement from all those involved in events of the past 40 years, and it could not be a one-sided exercise. And its value would be highly dependent on the extent to which individuals would be prepared to tell their story and under what circumstances. Such a process would require a government contribution, for example, over the release of documents, but it would have to be wholly independent of government. There might also, ultimately, be a role for a panel of historians to interpret all the available material with a view to producing the authoritative history of the Troubles. It wouldn't be a shortcut to dealing with the past, but it might help families and wider society achieve greater understanding and closure, however difficult that might be. And historians might just have more appropriate skills than lawyers in helping to resolve the past. In opposition and now in government, I've met victims groups, community organisations, academics and politicians from all parts of the community to move forward the debate on this important issue. And I plan to continue exploring ideas on the contentious issues of the past over the coming months with a view to making further announcements in the new year. So let me end with just a few words more about Leonard Steinberg. As someone whose grandfather had fled persecution in Eastern Europe, he was a wonderful example as somebody who rose from a humble background to build a hugely successful business. But Leonard understood instinctively that with wealth goes responsibility, which is why, as a philanthropist, he devoted so much time, effort, and money to helping others. He was unfailingly generous, both in his charity work and in politics. The Northern Ireland Troubles left an indelible mark on him. He was targeted and shot by terrorists. He lost friends to terrorists. But despite being forced to leave Northern Ireland in the 1970s, Leonard never lost his deep love for and his connections with it. So it was entirely appropriate that when he was deservedly awarded his peerage, he should take the title Lord Steinberg of Belfast. As an Ulster Unionist and a staunchly loyal Conservative, Leonard was totally committed to building a peaceful, stable and prosperous Northern Ireland within the United Kingdom and in which terrorism is history. As Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, those are my objectives too. So it's been an immense privilege to have been able to say a few words of tribute to Leonard this evening and about the place he loves so much, Northern Ireland.
Secretary of State's very kindly agreed to answer any questions, so I'm sure there will be many from the floor, and the only rule, as you know, in this House is you can ask him anything you want as long as you just state your name and organisation. So, do I see the first question? Any takers? Gentleman there, name and organisation.
Secretary of State Chris Alderston, Northern Ireland Retired Police Officers Association, formerly of the RUC. May I first thank you for your speech, and in particular your very measured remarks on the past. There is one area in which I would ask you, with your senior ministers and officials, to give extra attention, which didn't get a mention in your remarks. You mentioned justice and fairness. As a representative of retired police, I would like to see the government taking action, and I think it is a Secretary of State's responsibility and not a devolved responsibility, because it may involve primary legislation, taking action to address what we consider to be the very serious defects in the legislation which create and empower the Police Ombudsman for Northern Ireland. Because there is no other institution in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland which could come into this room and arrest me, detain me, interrogate me under judges' rules, search my house, seize my property, recommend me for prosecution, and against whom I have no means of complaint. And this is in contradiction of Article 13 of the European Convention on Human Rights, Article 11 on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and Article 12 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, I don't want to ambush you, Secretary of State, as you can tell, and your officials are very familiar with the arguments of my organisation, but I hope that you will feel able, during the course of your tenure of this high office, to look at this issue and help to restore the confidence of serving and retired police officers in an institution which we all supported at its instigation, an independent institution for investigating our alleged wrongdoings, and make sure that it's on an equal footing with other bodies in this country. Thank you.
Well, Chris, thank you very much. I mean, we have had interesting meetings when I was the shadow, and I would suggest actually that we do meet again. I mean, this is actually a devolved competence. I mean, I have a bigger worry about the Ombudsman. He's getting through 2 cases a year, and he's got 100 cases on his books. So, bluntly, I'm afraid none of you will be around by the time he gets around to the final cases. So, I think the Ombudsman is an issue that needs addressing, but we need to do it in collaboration with the devolved minister. But I should have given credit to my Minister of State, Hugo Swire, who I thought was stuck actually at Belfast Airport earlier. He and I suggest we should have a meeting with you and your colleagues to talk this through.
Further questions? Must be someone. Gentleman there, name and organisation.
John Paul, freelance. Yes, I'd just like to say that on a good day one lives and learns, and I didn't know anything at all about the Jewish community in Northern Ireland before this evening. I would be interested to know more, and it would be interesting to see if there was some way of bringing this about, other than me just looking it up on the internet. It would be an interesting historical exercise.
I think visiting Professor Godson could be a source of very interesting material on this matter. I think actually it's a really, really interesting subject. Some very, very distinguished people in Northern Ireland have come from the Jewish community. And bluntly, it's about time a historian wrote it up.
And many worn jokes, which I won't rehearse.
If I just say something, we have a young gentleman in the back here, it's called Stephen Jeffrey, who will be able to fill him in on everything he wants to know.
Of whom I know. Welcome, Stephen. I never knew what you looked like. Welcome. Yeah. Do I see any more questions? Lady at the back, name and all.
Yes, Gigi Salomon. I'd like to know why amnesty would not be appropriate in Northern Ireland when it was after the Spanish Civil War or after Franco, and what are the rules that would govern it differently over here or over Northern Ireland to in Spain, please?
I think incredibly simply, I had a discussion about this with the German ambassador today, and Northern Ireland, the good guys were in charge, and the good guys won. The good guys, under incredibly difficult and dangerous circumstances, maintained the rule of law under immensely dangerous circumstances and enabled the political process to come through. Virtually everywhere else, the bad guys were in charge. If you look at Argentina, you look at the Cameroons, you look at Uganda, you look at South Africa, Spain, and the good guys took over and were then magnanimous in a way. There's quite an interesting expression the German ambassador used. He said, as he was being done, he said, alles unter den Teppich. Oh. And everything went under the carpet. And then he said, what happened? He was the ambassador in Spain. He then said, after 30 years, there was a horrible smell. And he said, what was under the carpet then became Sprengstoff, which the IRA were very good at, i.e. explosive. And they've got a real problem. And this thing has literally blown up on them. But I think the most fundamental fact is, you know, those who believed in the rule of law and democracy were in charge. It's as simple as that. There were, right through the Troubles, you could be elected as a councillor, you could be elected to various democratic posts, and you could pursue your totally legitimate aims, by democratic means. It's only a tiny minority that want to impose their views by violence. I just think it's wrong to have an amnesty.
Secretary of State will answer all remaining questions in German. And I will attempt simultaneous translation. Name and organisation, please.
Alex Carlisle, House of Lords. I'm tempted to start by saying Herr Uber-Secretary, but I have a two-part question. The first is, could you give us a short sit-rep on the effectiveness of the attempt to stifle the activities of dissident Republicans by the combined control authorities in Northern Ireland? And secondly, given what appears to be a very low level of public support for dissident Republicans, is it your view that more could be done within the community in Northern Ireland to coin a fashionable phrase, de-radicalise those who might be tempted towards such activity?
Well, I'd like to pay tribute to Paul Carlisle's work as well in all that. He's played a key role. Well, firstly, we came in May, and it was quite clear that these groups were getting more determined, more competent and more capable. Some of them are ex-provisionals with technical expertise, but also, sadly, they were and still are recruiting misguided young people who, some who were born right after long after the ceasefire. The young man who allegedly shot police sergeant Stephen Carroll last year was a 17-year-old from Craigavon, from a fourth generation unemployed family. So we have spent a lot of time on this. I mean, this has been, we've taken this to the National Security Council, where it was agreed to increase the threat level in the UK, in GB to substantial, and it's also the threat from Northern Ireland is in Tier 1 alongside Islamic terrorism. So it is being taken extremely seriously at the highest level, and we are taking measures, bluntly, sadly, to reverse the peace dividend we took out. We went down from about 18,000 troops to just a few hundred who were mainly technicians involved with things like bomb disposal, and we went down from about 13,500 police down to about 7,500 today. And all the watchtowers have gone, all the roadblocks have gone, and there is absolutely no question of the military coming back. I mean, I think that would be politically absolutely disastrous. The only show in town is the police service of Northern Ireland, where we have a locally elected Justice Minister, we have a Chief Constable chosen by all four parties, and which now we're up to 29.38% Catholics in the latest figures from last month. And we have to work extremely closely with the Justice Minister. We have to work extremely closely with Faulkner and Devon Hearn and Michael Martin. And we are having a major impact. There have been 199 arrests so far this year on both sides of the border, compared to 126 for the whole of last year. So we do not underestimate this threat. You know, there's a small number of people, and they're going to be lucky ones. And we have been lucky. If the policeman at the Strand Road had not run across the road to the kebab shop, we'd have had 2 people killed 6 weeks ago. But also, we don't want to over-exaggerate it and overreact. So that's exactly what they want. So the only overt organisation that can be involved in this is the PSNI. And then touching on the second part of your question, I believe very strongly, and we've had a lot of talk about this in Dublin and locally with local ministers, we're not going to beat this just by a security solution. We have got to try something new. And we have got to get into these estates. And I would really recommend everyone mug up on the work of Peter Sheridan from Cooperation Ireland in Kilwilkie, where they've gone in and they've taken some of the very worst young ringleaders and got them out and shown them there's another world into activities which you could not dream of. I mean, people have been seconded to Formula 1 motor racing teams, Premier football clubs, top hairdressers in Mayfair. You might laugh. You've been to Craigavon, Craigavon is probably the only town in Western Europe I've been to with a lake where you can't go for a swim, you can't hire a boat, you can't buy a postcard, you can't buy ice cream, you can't buy a drink. It is almost impossible to imagine the dearth of any normal economic activity in these places. So are you surprised these young people are drawn into alcohol smuggling, into cigarette smuggling, and then inevitably there's this horrible alternative. There's this ghastly pornographic glamour of violence. So your second part of the question is incredibly important. We believe really strongly we have got to try to break the cycle. It isn't just a security solution to this. We've got to look at what in the old days used to be all hearts and minds.
I see some more gentlemen there, name and organisation. Yeah,
Henry Robertson, formerly of the Families Against Intimidation and Terror. I'd like to say that I don't believe that simply offering apprenticeships to extremists or young people who are influenced are going to solve this problem. I'd like to know what the Secretary of State is doing to try and get a community response from the various political parties. What new initiatives? PNSI can't resolve this. It is a very serious threat, and I wonder, do you have a role in asking Sinn Féin, the Alliance Party and all the other parties to come up with a community strategy which is innovative and new, because apprenticeships will not solve this problem?
Well, I just said that. I mean, there was a security solution. I think mentoring some of these young people will play a key part. But we are in this new world of devolution. We cannot impose. If we go blundering in as the Westminster government, we have to negotiate with local parties, and we are. But they have to deliver as well, and they have to be committed.
Gentlemen there, name and organisation.
Hello, my name is Scott Ritchie from BSL Networks. You talked earlier about talented young Northern Ireland people and how you recognise how there's many people all over the world, not just from the island of Ireland, who've gone on to be incredibly successful business people. How are you reaching out to them to actually be part of this process, to start using that entrepreneurism that they've showed all over the world to bring it back into the community, especially in the times of the Troubles? There's a lot of migration from talented young people leaving Northern Ireland. And surely they're part of the solution to how to bring prosperity, what peace looks like, not just in the near term, but for the next few generations.
I entirely agree. It's chicken and egg. My eldest son, embarrassing now, just graduated from Trinity Dublin. A lot of his best friends were from the north. We had a dinner in summer, very expensive, taking these hungry undergraduates out to dinner in Dublin. But there were two girls there, one from the Falls Road and one from South Belfast, been to Victoria. I think they've both come out with firsts. One's going to be absolute top whizzo mathematician. So one of these people did maths, further maths, yet more maths, even yet more maths. And she had no intention about Northern Ireland at all. Just absolutely no intention. And she said she just loved Dublin because there wasn't the same old, same old. She thought she might go back there in a few years' time when she might have been married. So it's complete chicken egg. We've got to make the place prosperous. We've got to make it attractive to go to. And I've been boring on about corporation tax ever since George Quigley and I cooked up the idea, sitting next to each other at the investment conference. I mean, that will definitely galvanise businesses. There isn't a single business I've been to in Northern Ireland doesn't say it would root them there, and don't underestimate the danger of some businesses moving out. And every one of them said they would invest significantly. They would increase their turnover. Nearly all of them say over a period of 10 years, as my bog standard question is, where would your business be if we got corporation tax down to a similar level as the Republic? And they nearly all say we'd be 30-40% bigger, 30%. And it is chicken and egg. I mean, it's just tragic that those two brilliant girls that we still got, despite attempts to damage it, a very, very good education system in Northern Ireland, which delivers GCSEs and A-levels 10% better than the rest of the UK. It is tragic. Those two girls had no intention whatever about Northern Ireland. And we've just got to make it attractive. And we've got to concentrate on the economy. But don't underestimate the sort of effect of a huge public sector. The average public sector wage is £28,000. The average private sector wage is £20,000. If you're a bright person with a first from Trinity Dublin, are you going to think about Northern Ireland? Are you going to join a big quango? Are you going to join a health board? Or are you going to take a risk making buses? You know, it is a real problem, and don't underestimate it, but the starter is to make the place really attractive for business. So my mantra, and I'm going to carry on banging on about it, is that I want to turn the whole of Northern Ireland into an enterprise zone. And the main tool, would be corporation tax. Got to persuade the Treasury, it might be a bit tough, but
Two more questions. I saw a couple of people had hands up. We'll take them as a clutch. Did I see anyone? What was I imagining? Gentleman at the back.
Can I just...
Name and organisation, please.
Jason, it's irrelevant.
It's very relevant. We all want to know.
Relevant,
Jason McHugh, if you can't say it.
yeah, exactly. I just wanted to correct an omission in an otherwise wonderful speech. Transitional justice, you missed one out. 5 is civil law, a hybrid version. And I think you should consider it.
Okay, write me a paper. I'll have a look at it.
Good deal.
Anyone else? Do I see anyone else? Going? Gentleman there.
Paul Morland, not representing any organisation, can you reflect on the impact of the economic crisis in the south, on the politics in the north, and particularly on whether over time, however well we wish the south and we wish the Republic's economy well, and I appreciate the problems are not to the benefit of Northern Ireland, nevertheless over time the case for the United Kingdom is going to become more compelling to a larger percentage of the people in the north, and the case for a united Ireland is going to be seen as less and less realistic. Is that the way you see it?
Well, I think crude economics are such that it's a complete non-starter. I mean, the Northern Ireland gets a 9 billion subvention from the British Treasury, i.e. the British Treasury gives it £9 billion more than is raised in taxation locally. And when you think that across the United Kingdom, 1 in 6 households has someone who's economically active, in Northern Ireland it's 1 in 5. If you think in Northern Ireland, 1 in 4 households has someone on incapacity or disability benefit. These are huge costs which are just simply way beyond the current ability of the Republic to bear. Simple as that. It's just an economic non-starter, in my opinion. But of course we believe in exports. It's interesting to see the member for West Belfast is heading south, giving up his seat. It'll be interesting to see how he, given his antipathy to the British Crown, he will have to take on a royal stipend as steward of the Chiltern Hundreds. It'll be very interesting to see how that conforms with his views. I saw him actually at the All-Ireland Choir competition on Sunday, and I wished him well in his new career, age 62. But perhaps it's a symbol, actually it's quite interesting, perhaps it's a symbol of normalisation in the north. Perhaps administration's a bit boring after his previous 62 years.
On that note, I'd just like to say that there is one sense in which our invitation to all has been misleading tonight, because we did advertise that Lord Bew of Donegal, one of the island of Ireland's preeminent historians, the saintly man, would be delivering the vote of thanks. He is unfortunately detained in mid-air somewhere today. There's been very high winds over the Irish Sea and a great queue of planes. Indeed, another source tells me that the British Midland Lounge at Belfast Airport looks like a cocktail party of the Northern Ireland political classes without the cocktails. So a rather sort of bleak, non-sectarian or cross-communal cocktail at that. However, at the very last minute and very generously, I'm delighted to say that Lord Cope of Berkeley, former Conservative Chief Whip in the House of Lords, who was Leonard Steinberg's Chief Whip in the Lords, also former Security Minister in Northern Ireland and now newly appointed Chairman of the British-Irish Interparliamentary Group. I've worried I'd stumble over that because of course the traditional thing is to say interplanetary group, but that is an old joke, which I'm relieved that not enough people here have heard here yet. I could actually get away with it and make anyone laugh. But we're very grateful to you for stepping in at the last minute, because I know of your great affection for Leonard, your great affection for the province, and you've done it so freely, easily and graciously at the last minute. Thank you, John, for coming, and a great pleasure to welcome you to a policy exchange platform.